Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. In some earlier episodes, we've talked about how the film Zeitgeist claimed that Jesus never historically existed because he was a Christianized version of more ancient pagan deities who were said to die and rise from the dead. One of those episodes dealt with the alleged parallels between Jesus and the Egyptian god Osiris. Today our attention will shift to whether Jesus is a Christian version of Sumerian Demuzi, a deity also referred to as Tammuz, in fact in the Old Testament. The creators of Zeitgeist considered Demuzi to be a dying and rising deity, hence their idea that Jesus is just a Christian version of Demuzi. As we've seen before, this idea suffers from the fact that mainstream religion scholars don't even accept the category of dying and rising gods in ancient religions. The skepticism over the whole category of dying and rising gods stems from the fact that there is no clear ancient text in any ancient Near Eastern religion that predates Christianity that has a dying and rising god for Christians to copy. Just as with Osiris, this may sound like an overclaim, but it isn't. Let's take a look. Now, if you've watched our earlier episodes on the alleged dying and rising gods and Jesus, you know what I'm going to ask right now. What do the primary sources say? Who was Demuzi, also known as Tammuz? What are the details of the myth? The myth of Demuzi is known from Sumerian and other Mesopotamian tablets. Let's start with how James G. Frazer, again in his Golden Bough, interpreted the myth. Frazer's ideas are central to the zeitgeist viewpoint. Now, Frazer wrote in that famous work, quote, "In the religious literature of Babylonia, Tammuz appears as the youthful spouse or lover of Ishtar, the great mother goddess. The references to their connection with each other in myth and ritual are both fragmentary and obscure, but we gather from them that each year Tammuz was believed to die, passing away from the cheerful earth to the gloomy subterranean world, and that every year his divine mistress journeyed in quest of him. The stern mother of the infernal regions reluctantly allowed Ishtar to depart, in company probably with her lover Tammuz, that the two might return together in the upper world, and that with their return all nature might revive," unquote. That is Frazer, again from an abridged version of the Golden Bough. Now, it's pretty clear that Frazer has Demuzi, Tammuz, coming back from the realm of the dead. But is that actually clear with respect to the primary sources? Most mainstream religion scholars today say, no, it isn't. For example, J.Z. Smith notes that, quote, "The assessment of the figure of Tammuz in Sumerian Demuzi as a dying and rising deity in the scholarly literature has varied more than any other deity placed in this class." Now that quotation from J.Z. Smith certainly suggests that there's a lot of disagreement about the Demuzi-Tammuz mythology when it comes to this dying and rising element. It makes you wonder, though, what's the problem? Frazer's description that we read seems so clear. Why would there be disagreement? Well, J.Z. Smith again answers that question, quote, "The ritual evidence is unambiguously negative. During the summer month of Tammuz, there was a period of wailing and lamentation for the dead deity. A substantial number of cultic hymns of mourning going back to the 2nd millennium BCE have been recovered. By the 6th century BCE, the ritual was practiced in Jerusalem, for example, Ezekiel 8:14, and in Syria. It is witnessed as late as the 5th century CE, and in variations persisted through medieval times. In all of these varied reports, the character of the ritual is the same. It is a relentlessly funereal cult," unquote. In other words, all of the literature that deals with the ritual methodology connected to the Demuzi-Tammuz myth, it all has him dead. None of it has him rising. It's a funeral dirge, and it's consistent. Again, this last point is the key to understanding the skepticism of other scholars who aren't Fraser. The primary texts have plenty to say about Demuzi dying and being mourned. They have nothing to say about Demuzi rising from the dead. Let me quote J.Z. Smith once more. He's very blunt. Quote, "There is no evidence for any cultic celebration of a rebirth of Tammuz apart from late Christian texts," unquote. Again, recall that you could have later Christian writers commenting on a ritual in a culture. And the Christian writers are just guessing at what these people are doing. The primary texts themselves from Sumeria, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, do not have Demuzi or Tammuz rising. So where did Fraser get the idea? Well, the source of the idea apparently is one Akkadian text that we call the Descent of Ishtar. The text describes the descent of the goddess into the underworld and her return. The text does refer to Tammuz, Ishtar's lover, being in the land of the dead, where we would expect him. However, the text nowhere mentions Tammuz leaving the realm of the dead. Scholars simply suppose that was the purpose of Ishtar's descent. In other words, we have a gap in the data, so let's just fill it in. To be fair, the supposition comes from one line in the text. Older translations have, quote, "on the day when Tammuz comes up," unquote, which sounds like Tammuz is rising at some point. But scholarship over the last 100 years has demonstrated Fraser's take, and that translation is a complete misunderstanding. 2 points establish that this is the case. Number one, the text has Ishtar performing certain actions upon Tammuz, all of which are, again, funeral in aspect. They are funereal rituals. He's dead. She treats him as a dead deity. Second, the words translated "comes up" are found elsewhere in necromancy rituals. At best, Tammuz appears as a ghost to Ishtar. He is not returning to the land of the living. It just doesn't work. Again, there are too many disconnections. This does not parallel what we see in the Jesus story. So how should we evaluate this? Well, at best, as we said a moment ago, what you have in the Demuzi-Tammuz mythology is that perhaps Ishtar is necromantically bringing back his ghost. And that was pretty much the state of affairs. Again, that is not a dying and rising deity situation. Demuzi, Tammuz does not come back to the land of the living. In the 1950s, there was a new portion of this text published, just discovered and translated, that actually inverts the whole reading of the text. That version of the myth actually has Ishtar going to the underworld to kill off Demuzi, Tammuz, to make sure he stays there. So we just do not have primary source information that backs up the claims of Zeitgeist and others who want to claim that the Demuzi-Tammuz story is the source for the Jesus resurrection story. We have no primary source evidence to support this. The differences between the resurrection story of Jesus and what we have in Demuzi-Tammuz, even taking its best shot as being the revival of a ghost or the summoning of a ghost, just do not match at all. Anyone who has read any of the New Testament gospel accounts, Matthew 28, Mark 16, Luke 24, John 20, knows that the New Testament story of Jesus has Jesus dying, certainly dead, for 3 days, and then rising from the dead back into the world of the living. That is not at all what you get in the Demuzi-Tammuz myth. And so once again, we have a complete disconnect. The zeitgeist thesis is a misguided myth. Thanks for watching this episode of Fringe Pop 321. Please watch the rest of the videos in this series and all of our other videos. And don't forget to visit our website, fp321.com, because what you know may not be so.